Hey everybody, Jazzy here, and here is part 2 of the Don't Starve Together Walter boss run. Today I get to talk you through the first few bosses, and I'm excited to show how Walter's perks come into play during these fights. There may have been some confusion after the first video, so allow me to clarify. This is not a boss rush. We spent the first season taming a Beefalo and killing 0 bosses, so it'd be a pretty crappy start if I was rushing. And honestly, if you're looking to kill bosses as quickly as possible, I don't think Walter would be the best choice. What I'm trying to demonstrate the most is how Walter plus a tamed Beefalo makes for a very powerful and safe playstyle. And I hope that these boss fights will help to illustrate that. But anyways, let's get to it. I spent the early part of winter setting up a bit of a mini base. So I'm gathering coal for crockpots while hunting walruses and looking for the loot stash. We got 2 giant deciduous biomes and 1 massive mosaic, so there was a lot of land combing. I was very thankful to have a Beefalo for that reason. I also got to drop off wires at Pig King. I didn't get around to farming for a Krampus sack in this playthrough, but if I were to build a farm, I'd consider building it around Pig King. That way I could slingshot the seasonal birds with gold rounds and give the morsels to the king, who would give me gold which I could use to make more gold rounds. Any extra meat I could just eat. It could be a completely self-sustaining method of continually spawning Krampus. Wicker bottom books are faster, but also require a lot more resources. The first batch of marble finally grew up, and now we have 20. I figure if I can double it up one more time, I'll have around 40 marble for Bee Queen. I can totally work with that. It just means we need to wait another 10 to 13 days for the next harvest. We found the loot stash on day 29 after several days of hunting. Believe it or not, this was the easy part. Because the no-eye deer won't appear as an icon on the map, it's hard to scan for them at night with limited light. Plus, since they spawn in autumn, they tend to wander out of the biomes where they spawn, so by midwinter they could be practically anywhere. I finally found them in some random forest halfway through day 30. So I'll fight Deerclops tonight and Klaus afterwards. And here comes boss number 1. Deerclops has a massive sanity aura, so the longer this fight wears on, the more dangerous it becomes as you quickly go insane and start spawning shadow creatures. For Walter though, this is one of the easiest boss fights, as he is completely unaffected by negative sanity auras. So Walter becomes one of the few characters who can feasibly kite Deerclops without losing any sanity whatsoever. He can still lose it from getting hit, but if we're fighting with an ornery Beefalo, we don't need to worry about that or the sanity aura. He's actually gaining a bit of sanity during the fight because of the tree bonus. After that, I'm running straight over to Klaus. I didn't want to use any cheese methods in this run, but it should be mentioned that you can basically stand on a boat and slingshot Klaus to death. No deer spells, no hound waves, no Deerclops. You won't even get any Krampus spawn this way. If you have 44 gold nuggets to spare, then go for it. But I just spent a full season taming an ornery Beefalo, so it would be a shame letting all that power go to waste. With Klaus, it's tough to avoid incidental damage, especially from the deer spells. So because of the length of the fight, Walter runs the risk of losing a lot of sanity over time. But on a Beefalo, Walter doesn't have to worry about the damage from fire or ice. As long as most of Klaus's swipes are dodged, Walter can finish the fight completely unscathed. That item switching you see me doing in the first inventory slot, it's how I cancel the Beefalo's attack animation right after the hit lands. This allows me to sneak in a few extra hits per attack and up my damage output. I bind inventory slot 1 to Z, and I have attack bound to spacebar, so it's easy for me to hold down space while hitting Z with my ring finger to switch inventory items. You can also do this with the right mouse button. I alternate between the two depending on the situation. The loot from the stash included a Bee Queen crown and a steel wool. Believe it or not, that steel wool might be as big of a GG as a Krampus sack. We're all set on inventory space, but a war saddle requires 4 steel wool, and a single Ukis will only drop up to 3. So this means I could potentially make a war saddle from killing just 1 Ukis. No construction amulet needed. Okay, I need to explain myself right here, because I'm making a few embarrassingly inefficient recipes for bacon and eggs. The only reason I'm doing this is to process all of this meat before it spoils. Cooked meat lasts about 10 days, and bacon eggs last 20. So even if I use inefficient recipes here, I can still utilize more of the food and get Walter some healing in the process. Once we get bundling wraps, I won't need to worry as much about spoilage. I'm working on my Shadow Manipulator while waiting for the marble trees to grow up as spring rolls around. One thing I noticed about Walter is that he doesn't appear to lose sanity from wet equipped items. He still loses some from having wetness above 55, but it's so small that it's totally negated by just being around a few trees. So even though dusk is longer and it rains a lot in spring, Walter still has a much easier time with the season. After several days of chopping dead trees, I finally got a single tree guard to spawn. So now I can make Shadow Manipulator. It'll be good to have Dark Swords for the ruins this time around, just in case I need to fight on foot. The second marble batch is ready to harvest. I did find 10 extra pieces of marble in the world, so we now have 41. B-Queen would need about 45 worth of marble rounds, but I'm not willing to wait another season, so what I'll do is use what I got, and then when that runs out, I'll finish her off with gold rounds. It'll make the fight a bit longer, but it shouldn't be too bad. I'm cooking a few butter muffins for Pinky, just in case I need to heal her during the fight. I don't anticipate either of us taking a ton of damage, but I'd rather be safe than have to call off the fight 2 days in because her health got low. In case I forgot to mention, yes, we are going to tap B-Queen with the slingshot until she dies. Walter's bee allergies make it impossible for him to tank her. And a Beefalo isn't much better for tanking unless you're just constantly taking time off to heal the Beefalo. So Slingshot is the safest way to go for Walter. For the first 2 phases, I'm going to try to sneak in 2 to 3 shots before B-Queen retreats. It's best to not shoot at her while she's flying away because some of your rounds might miss, and I can't afford too many missed shots with marbles. This method can be done with Wobie, but it's very dangerous. First, you need to find moments to feed him monster meat or he loses speed and eventually reverts back to small. But more importantly, if you make a single mistake and get hit, Wobie bucks you and runs away. Walter will then lose a ton of health and sanity in the bucking animation and will likely die. A Beefalo will absorb the damage and not buck, so it's still a much safer option. Now hounds will almost certainly come during the fight, so I need to be prepared for that. What I will do is blow the pan flute and put everybody to sleep while we deal with the hounds. The biggest danger here is that B-Queen can despawn while I'm fighting them, and that is a fate absolutely worse than death. But once the hounds are dispatched, we can get right back to the fight. For her final 2 phases, I will lead the Grumblebees away during the charge and then run back to B-Queen for more shots. It's nice how she will stay completely still during these phases, so it tends to be faster than the first half. Just keep the Grumblebees away and keep shooting. We will need to remount the Beefalo during this fight. A fully tamed Beefalo will still buck you after about 1.6 days, so before that happens, we want to put B-Queen to sleep and remount Pinky. We can heal her if she's lost any health, but I've been good so far, and she's had plenty of time to heal from the incidental hits. Once the marble is done, I'm switching to gold rounds. These deal less damage, but it shouldn't lengthen the fight too much if we're already in the final phase. We also want to keep an eye on the dwarf stars because they will go out after 28 minutes. But we can recast after luring the Grumblebees away. B-Queen fell at the top of day 46. The fight took a little over 3 days in total. Again, this is far from the quickest method, but it carries the benefit of being one of the safest. Walter gets a lot of protection while mounted, and his allergies are completely negated, so as long as you keep the Beefalo properly managed, you can sit back and pew-pew with a lot of reassurance. Obviously, the biggest reward from this fight is the bundling wrap blueprint, and the crown will be helpful for recovering sanity in the ruins. I don't think jelly beans are a great healing option for Walter. Because of his sanity loss at low health, you don't typically want to wait for his health to get low before healing. We're going to avoid too many tanking situations, so we'll never fully benefit from the healing of a jelly bean. But if we're doing most of our fighting with an ornery Beefalo, Walter shouldn't be losing too much health in most situations anyway. I'll still cook the jelly beans for posterity, and I definitely plan to use them for Fuel Weaver. So next time Walter is going to fight some Meeskies, finish clearing the ruins, and fight Ancient Guardian. Then it'll be time for Shadow Pieces and Fuel Weaver. Hope you're enjoying the run so far, and stay tuned for part 3. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.